The word landed in the middle of the room like something dropped from a great height. Worthless. Derek didn't whisper it. He didn't even hesitate. He said it the way men say things when they've forgotten or stopped caring who's listening. Meghan stood 3 feet away holding a glass of sparkling water, wearing the soft cream blouse she'd ironed that morning. Around them, colleagues laughed, glasses clinked, the Vantage Group quarterly celebration hummed along. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She set her glass down on the nearest table carefully, quietly, and walked toward the exit. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 weeks ago Meghan had signed his future, and she hadn't decided yet whether to take it back. If this story already has your attention, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss what happens next. And drop a like if you're already on Meghan's side. Now let's go back to where this really began. The name on the contract read Meghan Cole. It always had. Even on the morning she married Derek Diaz, standing in a small garden ceremony with 23 guests barefoot on warm Georgia grass, her natural hair pinned back with her grandmother's pearl clip, she had already decided. The name Cole would stay. Not out of stubbornness, not out of some quiet rebellion against the institution of marriage, but because Cole and Associates had been built under that name, filed under that name, registered with the state of Georgia under that name, and she had earned every syllable of it long before Derek ever called her beautiful. She had never lied to him. She simply had never explained. There is a difference, she always believed, between a secret kept out of shame and a secret kept out of a protection. Meghan had built her consulting firm at 26, 2 years before she met Derek at a mutual friend's rooftop birthday party in Atlanta. He had been charming that night, confident without being loud. He asked her what she did, and she said consulting, and he nodded the way people nod when they don't want to ask follow-up questions, and she liked him more for it. She didn't want to be the woman whose career walked into a room before she did. She wanted to be known first, just as Meghan, just as herself. And for a while, for 3 good years, that was exactly what she was. Cole and Associates occupied a quiet floor in a building 12 minutes from their house. Meghan drove there 3 or 4 mornings a week, sometimes more. When Derek asked what she was working on, she said client strategy, market analysis, a project. He stopped asking detailed questions sometime around year 2. By year 3, he had stopped asking altogether. He had started to assume, and assumptions Meghan knew were the quiet beginning of contempt. She remembered the first time she heard the shift in his voice. A Sunday dinner, just the two of them, when she mentioned she'd been in back-to-back calls all day. He had looked up from his phone, not with interest, but with the particular blankness of a man humoring a story he doesn't believe is important, and said, "Must be nice to have a relaxed schedule." She hadn't corrected him. She had filed it away instead. That was Meghan's particular discipline. She did not react to single moments. She collected them. Quietly, methodically, the way someone builds a case not out of malice, but out of the trained instinct of a woman who had spent her career reading patterns in data, in behavior, in the subtle architecture of how people treat what they don't fully understand. By the time the Vantage Group quarterly party arrived, by the time Derek said worthless in a room full of people who worked for the company, she quietly advised she had been collecting for almost a year. That Monday morning, 2 days after the party, Meghan sat at the kitchen island with her laptop open. Outside, the Atlanta morning was pale gold and unhurried. Derek moved behind her, pouring coffee, checking his phone, already rehearsing the version of himself he would perform at the office. "Big week," he said to no one in particular. Meghan said. On her screen, an email from Raymond Cross, head of Human Resources at Vantage Group. "Dear M. Cole, thank you for your timely review and final approval on the director-level promotion package. Your signature has been received and logged. The announcement will proceed Thursday." She read it once, then closed the laptop. Derek set his mug in the sink, straightened his jacket in the hallway mirror, and left without kissing her goodbye. The door clicked shut behind him with the casual finality of a man who had already mentally left a room before his body did. Meghan sat for a moment in the quiet. Then she opened the laptop again and replied to Raymond Cross with 3 words confirmed. "Thank you." It was Roberta who called that afternoon. Roberta, Diaz, Derek's mother, was a woman who delivered her cruelties with the cheerful efficiency of someone who believed she was simply being honest. She called every Tuesday and Thursday, and her calls followed a reliable architecture, 10 minutes of family news, 5 minutes of observations about Meghan's life choices, and a closing statement designed to settle in the chest and stay there. Today she skipped the family news entirely. "I heard Derek's promotion is almost through," she said, her voice bright with the particular warmth she reserved for conversations about her son. "I always knew he'd get there. He works so hard. You know Claudette's daughter-in-law, the one who's a VP at that firm downtown? She threw Marcus a dinner when he made director. Full sit-down, catered." Meghan moved to the window phone pressed to her ear, watching a neighbor's dog pull against its leash in the yard across the street. You might want to think about something like that, Roberta continued. Derek's going to be moving in different circles now. It reflects on him, you know, the kind of support he has at home. A wife who, well. A small pause, perfectly calibrated. You know what I mean, Meghan. I do, Meghan said. He deserves someone who actually contributes. Roberta said, her voice dropping into the gentle register she used when she believed she was dispensing wisdom. Not someone who freelances from the couch. Meghan looked at the dog across the street. It had stopped pulling. It was sitting now very still, waiting for something only it could sense was coming. You're right, Roberta, Meghan said. Derek deserves exactly what's coming to him. A beat of silence. Well, yes, Roberta said, slightly uncertain, as if the sentence had landed differently than she intended. That's what I'm saying. I know, Meghan said. I'll talk to you soon. She ended the call and set the phone face down on the windowsill. That evening she drove to Patricia's office. Patricia Wells, the only person alive who knew both names, who had watched Meghan build Cole and Associates from a 2-client operation in a borrowed conference room into a $14 million consultancy, was already pouring tea when Meghan walked in. They had known each other 11 years. They did not require preamble. Meghan sat down, set her bag on the chair beside her, and said, He called me worthless, in front of his colleagues, in front of her. Patricia set the cup in front of her and sat across the desk. She did not offer sympathy in the conventional sense. She offered something better: attention. Absolute, unhurried, unshockable attention. And the promotion? Patricia asked. Goes through Thursday, Meghan said. My signature is already on it. Patricia looked at her steadily. Do you want to pull it? Meghan wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Outside, the Atlanta evening moved quietly past the window headlights weaned in the trees, the ordinary world continuing at its ordinary pace. Not yet, she said. She looked down at the tea. The surface was perfectly still. Let it run its course. There is a particular kind of silence that lives inside a marriage in the process of dying. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a slammed door or a raised voice or a dramatic ultimatum delivered across a kitchen counter. It comes quietly, the way water finds its level, the way a room cools after the heat has been off for hours. You don't notice it happening. You only notice one unremarkable morning that it has already happened, that something which used to fill the space between two people has simply stopped. Meghan had been watching it happen for 8 months. She was precise about the timeline because she was precise about everything. 8 months ago was when Derek had started working late on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not occasionally, not once in a while, but with the reliable consistency of a scheduled appointment. 8 months ago was when he had started leaving the room to take certain phone calls, when he had started sleeping on his side of the bed with the particular stillness of a man who is carefully, consciously not moving toward someone. 8 months ago was when the small courtesies of their marriage, the hand on the small of her back, the coffee made without asking the question, asked at the end of a long day, that meant I still want to know about you, had quietly, efficiently disappeared. She had not confronted him. She had observed him. This was not passivity. This was strategy. Meghan had spent her entire career studying behavior, how organizations moved, how people justified their decisions, how systems failed, not in loud, dramatic collapses, but in the slow accumulation of small, unaddressed erosions. She applied the same discipline to her marriage. Not because she was cold, but because she had learned long ago that a woman who reacts in the moment rarely gets the outcome she actually deserves. She wanted the outcome she deserved. The phone had been left on the bathroom counter on a Wednesday evening in March. Derek was in the shower. Meghan had walked in to refill her water glass from the tap, a small, ordinary, entirely unremarkable action, and the screen had lit up with a message preview before she touched anything. Lexi can't stop thinking about Thursday. Don't be late this time. Meghan stood very still for 3 full seconds. Then she picked up her water glass, walked back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way Patricia had taught her years ago before a particularly high-stakes board presentation, when Meghan's hands had been shaking and Patricia had looked at her and said, "The data doesn't change because your hands are shaking. Slow down, then walk in." The data didn't change. She stood up, walked back to the bathroom, and took a single photograph of the screen with her own phone before the preview disappeared. Then she set her water glass down, turned off the tap she'd forgotten to use, and went back to the bedroom. When Derek came out of the shower 10 minutes later, she was reading. He picked up his phone without looking at her, glanced at the screen, and set it face down on the nightstand. His shoulders dropped barely, almost imperceptibly, with what she recognized as relief. She turned a page. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, "well, really long." "Get some rest," she said, and that was all. She met Patricia the following Friday. The office was quiet at that hour late afternoon, most of the staff already gone, the Atlanta light coming in long and amber through the tall windows. Patricia listened without interrupting, which was one of the many things Meghan had always valued about her. When Meghan finished speaking, Patricia folded her hands on the desk and was silent for a moment. "How many?" she asked. "That I've documented," Meghan said. 14 separate instances over 6 months. Calls, messages, a dinner reservation at Ember, his card, her name on the booking. Patricia nodded slowly. "And the photograph from Wednesday. Time-stamped. Backed up. Good." Patricia reached for her pen, then set it back down. She looked at Meghan with the measured steadiness of someone choosing words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. "Meghan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it without thinking about what you think I want to hear." Meghan waited. "Do you still want to save this marriage?" The question sat in the air between them. Outside, a car moved slowly through the parking lot, below its headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling. "No," Meghan said. She said it without hesitation, without drama, without the tremor that she had half expected to find in her own voice. It came out level, clear, like a door closing gently on a room she had already packed up and left. "I think I stopped wanting that a long time ago. I just needed to know for certain what I was dealing with before I decided what to do about it." Patricia looked at her for a moment longer. Then she picked up her pen. "All right," she said. "Then we do this correctly. We do this completely. And we do this in a way that leaves no room for reversal." "Yes," Meghan said. "Not yet," Patricia said. "There are things still in motion. His promotion review, the prenuptial filings. I want to make sure every document is airtight before anything moves." Meghan nodded. "How long?" she asked. Patricia made a note on the yellow legal pad she always preferred over any digital system. 3 weeks, maybe 4. "Can you hold?" Meghan thought about the bathroom counter, the phone screen lighting up, the way Derek had come out of the shower and reached for his phone with the easy, unguarded reflex of a man who had never once considered that the woman reading quietly on the bed might already know everything. "I've been holding for 8 months, she said. 3 more weeks is nothing." That night, Derek came home with flowers. Pink peonies, her favorite, which he had remembered, which surprised her for a brief, involuntary second before she understood. He set them on the kitchen counter with a small, careful smile, the kind of smile a man produces when he is managing his own guilt, when the gesture is not for the recipient but for himself. A way of balancing a private ledger he believed no one else could read. "What's the occasion?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just, you know." "Thank you," she said. She filled a vase with water and arranged the flowers with the unhurried ease of a woman who felt nothing in particular about the gesture. Not anger, not sadness, not the hollow ache she might have expected. Just clarity. She knew with the quiet certainty of someone who has finally stopped hoping for a different answer that these flowers had not been purchased on the way home from the office. They had been purchased on the way home from somewhere else, from someone else's Tuesday. She trimmed the stems over the sink and placed the vase on the windowsill where the last of the evening light caught the pale pink petals and made them look briefly like something worth keeping. She dried her hands. She went to bed. The dinner had been Roberta's idea, which meant it had been designed from the beginning to be a performance. Not a family dinner, a performance. There was a difference, and Meghan had learned to recognize it in the particular way Roberta set the table. The good china, the cloth napkins, the flower arrangement ordered from the florist rather than picked up from the grocery store. These were not the choices of a woman hosting a casual Sunday meal. These were the choices of a woman staging a room in which she intended to say something. Roberta Diaz lived in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb 20 minutes from theirs. The house was immaculate in the way that suggested constant maintenance surfaces that had never been allowed to accumulate evidence of ordinary living, a living room that felt more like a display than a space where anyone had ever sat comfortably and exhaled. Meghan had spent 5 years learning to move through it gracefully, to sit in the chairs without appearing to actually use them. Tonight there were 8 people at the table. Roberta, Derek, Meghan. Roberta's sister Claudette, who had driven up from Savannah, and who smiled at Meghan with the particular warmth of a woman who had been briefed. Claudette's husband Bernard, who mostly ate. 2 of Roberta's neighbors, Gloria and her husband Terence, who had arrived early and who Meghan had never met before tonight, which told her everything about the function they were intended to serve. Witnesses, an audience, people in front of whom a point could be made and verified. Meghan had brought a sweet potato casserole. It sat at the far end of the table, largely untouched, next to the catered dishes Roberta had ordered from the restaurant she reserved for important occasions. It started as it always started with Claudette's daughter-in-law. Marcus just made VP. Claudette announced approximately 11 minutes into the meal, with the practiced casualness of someone who had been waiting for precisely this conversational opening. "We're so proud. And Simone, Simone Derrick, you met her at Christmas. She organized this whole dinner for him at Flourish. Private room full service, 40 guests. That's wonderful," Meghan said. "She's just remarkable," Roberta said, passing the rolls. "That's what I mean about support, A man reaches a certain level, and the woman beside him, well, she rises to it, naturally." Bernard reached for the rolls without comment. Gloria nodded with the enthusiasm of a woman who had been given her cue. "It's so important," Gloria agreed. "Terence always says a man's success starts at home." Terence, for his part, said nothing. He appeared to be very interested in the green beans. Meghan lifted her water glass and took a small, even sip. 30 minutes into the meal, Roberta made her move. She did it gently, which was always more effective than doing it directly. She brought up a woman named Diane, the wife of one of Derrick's former colleagues, who had apparently just launched a boutique firm and had been featured in some local business publication. Roberta described it at length. The feature, the photograph, the quote about female ambition and building something that matters. "I sent Derrick the article," Roberta said, glancing down the table at her son with a smile of maternal pride that contained within it, like a seed inside fruit, something else entirely. "I just thought, inspiring." Derrick picked up his fork. "Yeah, Diane's always been driven." Roberta said. She let a beat pass, one beat precisely long enough to be felt. "It's good when both people in a marriage are building something, moving forward together. It creates a certain energy." She turned to Meghan with an expression of such polished warmth that someone who didn't know her might have mistaken it for affection. "How is your work going, Meghan? Still doing your consulting?" The way she said consulting contained a set of quotation marks that were invisible to the ear, but perfectly legible to anyone paying attention. "It's going well," Meghan said. "Thank you for asking." "That's good," Roberta said. "That's nice. It's good to have a little project." Gloria made a soft sound of agreement. Claudette refilled her own wineglass, and then Derrick, her husband, the man who had stood in a garden on warm Georgia grass and promised in front of 23 people to be her partner, put his fork down, leaned back slightly in his chair, and said with the easy, unthinking confidence of a man who had forgotten to be careful, "Meghan just does her thing. Nothing major. It keeps her busy." Nothing major. The table moved on. Roberta reached for the serving spoon. Bernard asked Derrick about the promotion timeline. Claudette said something about traffic on the drive up from Savannah. Meghan cut a small piece of sweet potato casserole, her own, the one at the far end of the table that no one had touched, and ate it slowly. It was good. She had made it the way her grandmother taught her, with brown sugar and a little nutmeg, and she thought, as she often did in moments like this, about her grandmother's hands moving through a kitchen with the absolute authority of a woman who had never once needed anyone's permission to know her own value. She set her fork down. She began to count. Not in anger. Anger was too hot, too imprecise, too easily visible on a face. She counted the way she counted everything methodically, completely, without waste. She counted the dinner, the rolls that no one passed her way. The word project. The phrase nothing major. The way Derrick had said it without lowering his voice, without a flicker of consideration, as though she were a piece of furniture he had grown so accustomed to that he had forgotten it had once been chosen. She counted all of it, and she filed it. Dessert was served at 9:15. Meghan helped carry plates to the kitchen, rinse dishes at the sink, wrap the leftover casserole in the container she had brought it in. Roberta stood beside her at the counter for a moment, refilling the creamer, and said quietly, just for the two of them, in the tone she reserved for statements she wanted to be deniable later, "I only want what's best for Derrick." "I know," Meghan said. She dried her hands on the dish towel, folded it neatly over the oven handle, and picked up her container. "He's going to be moving in different circles," Roberta continued. "A director at Vantage Group. That carries weight. People will be watching. The whole package matters." Meghan looked at her not with hostility, not with the wounded expression Roberta had perhaps been expecting, but with the calm, complete attention of a woman who has already made a decision and is simply waiting for the right moment to act on it. You're right, Roberta, she said in a web. The whole package matters. She said goodnight to the table. She hugged Claudette, shook Gloria's hand, nodded at Bernard. She walked to the car alone because Derek was still inside, laughing at something Terrence had finally said. In the car, she checked her phone. One email. From her calendar app. A reminder she had set for herself 3 days ago. Tuesday approval committee, internal review, confirm attendance. She locked the phone, started the engine, pulled out of Roberta's driveway into the quiet suburban dark. She had been counting all evening. Now she was done counting. Now she was ready to act. Tuesday morning arrived the way consequential mornings often do, quietly without announcement, dressed in the ordinary clothes of an ordinary day. The alarm went off at 6:15. Meghan was already awake. She had been lying on her side of the bed for 20 minutes, watching the ceiling lighten incrementally from gray to pale gold as the Atlanta morning assembled itself outside the window. She felt no anxiety, no racing heart, no tight chest, no, the particular dread that used to accompany high-stakes mornings in her early career. What she felt instead was something cleaner and quieter than that. The focused stillness of a woman who is prepared completely and is simply waiting for the preparation to become action. She rose before Derek stirred. Showered. Dressed carefully, a structured deep navy blazer over a soft white blouse, dark tailored trousers, the small gold earrings her grandmother had left her. She made coffee for 2 out of habit, then stood at the kitchen window drinking hers, slowly watching a cardinal move through the oak tree in the backyard with the purposeful, unhurried confidence of a creature that had never once questioned its right to be exactly where it was. Derek came downstairs at 6:55. He was already animated. She could hear it before she saw it, the particular energy in his footsteps, the way he moved through the kitchen with the loose, expansive ease of a man who believed today was going to be a good day. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal one with the fine chalk stripe that he saved for presentations and what he called moments that count. He poured his coffee, leaned against the counter, and looked at her with a brightness in his eyes that she recognized, not directed at her, not generated by her presence, but carried in from somewhere else, from the anticipation of something waiting for him outside this kitchen. "Big day," he said. "Is it?" Meghan said. "They're announcing the director confirmations today. Raymond said the committee approvals all came through last week." He straightened his jacket lapel in the reflection of the microwave door, a habit she had watched him perform 1,000 times. "I've been waiting for this for 2 years." "I know," Meghan said. He picked up his coffee, took a long, satisfied sip, and set it down. He looked at her, then really looked for perhaps the first time in weeks, and she watched him assemble something that resembled consideration. "You should do something nice today," he said. "Treat yourself. We'll celebrate tonight." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Sure," she said. "I have some things to take care of this morning anyway." He nodded, already reaching for his keys. Already halfway out the door in every way that mattered. "Don't wait up if it runs late," he said. "I'll probably take the team out after." And then he was gone. The door closed. His car backed out of the driveway with the smooth confidence of a man who had never considered, not even for a single passing moment, that the woman standing at his kitchen window might be the reason his morning was about to go exactly as planned. Meghan waited until she heard his car turn off the street. Then she opened her laptop. The email from Raymond Cross was already in her inbox, sent at 6:42 that morning, while she had been watching the cardinal in the oak tree. "Dear M. Cole, final confirmation required by 9 a.m. for the director-level approval package. Please confirm your attendance at Thursday's all-hands presentation. The committee's signatures will be formally acknowledged before the full staff." She read it twice. Then she typed 3 words and pressed send. "Confirmed. Thank you." She closed the laptop, rinsed her coffee cup, picked up her bag, and drove to Patricia's office. Patricia's building was 12 minutes away on a good morning. Today it took 9. The parking lot was nearly empty when Meghan arrived. Patricia's silver sedan already in its usual spot, the lights already on in the corner office on the 2nd floor, visible from the street, the way a lighthouse is visible long before you need it. Patricia had the documents laid out before Meghan sat down. This was one of the things Meghan valued most about her. She did not waste time with setup. The documents were already there. The relevant sections were already marked with small yellow tabs. The coffee was already poured. Patricia understood that preparation was its own form of respect. The prenuptial agreement. Patricia began touching the first stack with one precise finger. Is airtight. Cole & Associates the firm, the intellectual property the client, contracts, all subsidiary holdings are categorically excluded from any marital asset claim. The valuation stands at $14.3 million as of last quarter's filing. Meghan nodded. She had known these numbers for years, but there was something different about hearing them spoken aloud in this room on this morning, with the quiet weight of what was coming. The Vantage Group contract. Patricia continued moving to the second stack. Is registered under Meghan Cole, your legal name prior to marriage, which you have never formally changed on any professional documentation. There is no legal requirement to disclose a professional name to an employer unless specifically contracted otherwise, which you were not. Your identity as M. Cole on the approval committee is entirely consistent with your professional filing history. And Raymond Cross? Meghan asked. Raymond Cross knows you as M. Cole. He has communicated with you exclusively by email for the duration of your consultancy engagement. He has never met you in person. Patricia looked up. Thursday will be the first time. Meghan absorbed this. The particular geometry of it, the way 7 years of careful parallel precision were about to converge in a single room, a single morning settled over her, not with the weight of dread, but with the clarity of something finally irrevocably aligned. And the other matter, Meghan said. Patricia set down the first 2 stacks and reached for the third. It was thinner than the others. A single manila folder tabbed in red rather than yellow. She opened it and turned it to face Meghan across the desk. Inside a loan agreement, a property deed, a signature line at the bottom of page 4, and above that signature line in the familiar, slightly forward-leaning hand, she had watched sign birthday cards and lease agreements and the marriage certificate itself, the name Meghan Diaz. Meghan looked at it for a long moment without speaking. The condo was in Buckhead, $380,000. The loan had been processed 6 weeks ago through a private lender Derek had found outside their usual bank. Her name, her married name, the one she had given him freely, the one she had chosen to carry alongside Cole, without ever being asked to give one up for the other, had been used as a guarantor without her knowledge, without her consent, without a single conversation. He had taken it. Quietly. The way someone takes something they believe will never be noticed from someone they believe will never look. The lender confirmed the signature is not a match to your records on file, Patricia said. Her voice was steady and precise. A forensic comparison takes 48 hours to formalize, but the initial review is already consistent with forgery. Meghan did not move for several seconds. Outside Patricia's window, Atlanta was fully awake now, traffic building on the boulevard below the ordinary Tuesday morning world, moving at its ordinary Tuesday morning pace, entirely indifferent to what was being quietly completely assembled in this corner office on the second floor. She looked up from the document. Then we do this the right way, she said. Patricia held her gaze. Are you certain? Meghan reached across the desk. Patricia handed her a pen. She signed where Patricia indicated not the loan document, but the formal complaint to the lender and the notification to Vantage Group's legal office, initiating a review of conduct by a named employee ahead of Thursday's all-hands presentation. Her handwriting was calm, even, unhurried. The signature of a woman who had been prepared for this moment long before the moment knew she was coming. At 4:17 that afternoon, Derek sent her a text message. It's official. Director confirmed. Making a reservation at Ember tonight, just us. Meghan read it once. Then she set her phone face down on her desk, turned back to her screen, and finished the quarterly strategy report she had been preparing for a client whose name Derek had never once thought to ask. There is a moment in every carefully constructed life when the foundation reveals itself to be something other than what was promised. Not with a crash, not with the dramatic collapse of something large and visible, but with the quiet specific horror of turning over a stone you have walked past 1,000 times and finding underneath it something that changes the entire character of the ground you have been standing on. Meghan had turned over that stone on a Tuesday morning in Patricia's office, and what she found underneath it was not simply betrayal she had already catalogued, already processed, already filed away, with the precision of a woman who had stopped being surprised by her husband's capacity for smallness. What she found was something colder than betrayal, something that crossed a line she had not known until this moment that she had drawn. He had used her name, not her presence, not her trust, which he had already spent, not even her feelings, which she had long since reclaimed from the space between them and placed somewhere he could no longer reach. He had used the legal instrument of her identity, the name she had carried into a marriage she had entered in good faith, as a financial tool, a guarantor's signature on a loan for a property she had never seen purchased for a woman whose name appeared in her husband's phone, with a kiss emoji, processed through a lender chosen specifically because it was outside their shared banking relationship. He had done it quietly, carefully, with the deliberate, methodical precision of a man who understood exactly what he was doing and had calculated with complete confidence that he would never be caught. That confidence Meghan thought sitting across from Patricia as the Atlanta morning moved past the window, that absolute unexamined confidence that she would never look, never find, never act, was perhaps the most clarifying thing of all. It told her everything she needed to know about what he believed she was. Nothing major he had said at his mother's dinner table. Just keeps her busy. She picked up Patricia's pen. The formal complaint was 3 pages long. Patricia had prepared it over the previous 72 hours, with the thoroughness she applied to everything, every clause considered, every attachment correctly labeled, every timeline meticulously documented. The complaint named Derek Diaz specifically. It referenced the loan agreement, the forged signature, the property address in Buckhead the lender's records. It was submitted simultaneously to the private lender's fraud division and to the legal office of Vantage Group, where Derek's employment record and his newly confirmed director status were both on file. Meghan signed each copy with the same unhurried hand. When she finished, Patricia gathered the documents, aligned the edges precisely, and slid them into separate envelopes already addressed and sealed, except for the final flap. She looked at Meghan across the desk. "Once these go," Patricia said, "there is no version of this that stays quiet." "I know," Meghan said. "The lender will initiate a fraud review. Vantage Group's legal office will be required to notify HR. HR will be required to notify the relevant department head." Patricia paused. Derek's director confirmation was processed this morning. He will have had it for approximately, she glanced at the clock on the wall, 7 hours before the notification reaches his employer. 7 hours, Meghan said. That's enough time for a celebration dinner. Patricia looked at her carefully. "Are you all right?" It was the question Patricia asked perhaps twice a year, not as a formality, not as conversational filler, but as a genuine direct inquiry that required a genuine direct answer. Meghan had learned not to deflect it. She considered the question honestly. Was she all right? She thought about the pink peonies on the windowsill, the text message sent to Lexi before the one sent to her, the bathroom counter, the lit phone screen, the 3 seconds she had stood very still before she picked up her water glass and walked back to the bedroom. She thought about Roberta's table and the word project, and the way Derek had leaned back in his chair with the easy confidence of a man who had never once considered that the woman beside him might be more than the story he had decided to tell about her. She thought about the document she had just signed, the clean, unambiguous lines of the complaint, the way her own signature looked on the page, steady, complete, undramatic. "Yes," she said. "I think I've been all right for longer than I realized. I just needed this to be finished." Patricia nodded once. She sealed the envelopes. The submissions went out at 11:47 that morning. Meghan drove home through the midday Atlanta traffic windows down the city, moving around her with its ordinary Tuesday energy construction, on Peachtree, a school bus turning carefully through an intersection, 2 women walking a shared dog on the sidewalk, outside a coffee shop laughing at something between them. She parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment. The house looked the same as it always looked. Red brick, black shutters, the hydrangeas she had planted along the front walk 2 springs ago, now full and heavy-headed in the June heat. A house that looked from the outside like the house of a life proceeding normally. She went inside, made lunch, answered 3 client emails, reviewed a strategy deck for a presentation she had scheduled for the following week. At 2:30, she called her younger sister in Charlotte, and they talked for 40 minutes about nothing important, their mother's garden, a television series her sister had been watching, a recipe their grandmother used to make that neither of them could quite replicate. It was the most ordinary conversation she had had in weeks, and she held on to it gratefully, the way you hold on to something warm and familiar when the rest of the day has required you to be very precise and very still. At 4:17, Derek's text arrived. "It's official. Director confirmed. Making a reservation at Ember tonight, just us." She read it, set the phone face down, went back to her strategy deck. 40 minutes later, a second message. "You okay? Haven't heard back?" She picked up the phone. "Congratulations," she typed. "I have a headache. Go celebrate with the team. Don't rush home." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared, appeared again. "You sure?" "I'm sure," she wrote. "You've earned it." She set the phone down again, stood up, walked to the kitchen window where the pink peonies had been. The vase was still there, the flowers past their peak, now petals beginning to loosen at the edges with the particular fragile transparency of something that had already given everything it had. She lifted the vase, carried it to the sink, and poured the water out slowly. Then she placed the empty vase back on the sill, Outside, the late afternoon light came through the glass at a low golden angle, catching the curved surface of the vase and throwing a small perfect arc of light across the kitchen counter. She watched it for a moment. Then she went back to her desk, opened her laptop, and began to prepare for Thursday. Derek planned the party the way he planned most things he was proud of, loudly, quickly, and without consulting anyone who might have complicated his vision of how it should go. By Wednesday evening, the house had been rearranged. The dining table extended to its full length, the good glasses brought down from the cabinet shelf, where they lived 11 months of the year, a catering order placed with the restaurant on Cascade that did the lamb chops he liked. He had invited 9 people. Roberta, obviously. 2 colleagues from Vantage Group. Both men, both loud in the way men become loud when they are celebrating someone else's achievement and want to be associated with it. A neighbor couple, the Washingtons, who Derek liked because Harold Washington laughed at his jokes with reliable enthusiasm. And Claudette, who had driven back up from Savannah for the occasion, which told Meghan that Roberta had made calls. Lexi Monroe was not on the guest list. She was referred to instead as a colleague who sends her congratulations, this offered by Derek, at approximately 7:15, unprompted in the kitchen, while Meghan was arranging the cheese board she had prepared because the catering order had not included one and she had noticed and filled the gap without comment. The way she always had. The way that had been so consistent and so quiet for so long that it had become in Derek's understanding of their household simply the way things worked. A force of nature, background, nothing major. Lexi from the strategy team. He said, his voice carrying the precise calibration of a man introducing a name he needs to make sound unremarkable. She couldn't make it. Sends her best. That's kind of her, Meghan said. She placed a small bunch of grapes at the edge of the board, adjusted a wedge of aged Gouda, and carried it to the table. Derek watched her for a half-second too long before turning back to his phone. The guests arrived between 7:30 and 8. Roberta came first, as she always did with Claudette, and a bottle of champagne she held out to Derek with both hands, like an offering, her face arranged in the particular expression she reserved for moments of maximum maternal satisfaction, proud, proprietary, slightly tearful in a way that was more about performance than feeling. "My son," she said, pulling him into a hug that lasted several seconds longer than necessary. "Director, I always knew." Derek received this with the ease of a man entirely comfortable being the center of a room's attention. He kissed her cheek, took the champagne, called to Meghan to bring glasses. Meghan brought glasses. The Washingtons arrived with a card and a bottle of bourbon. The colleagues, Marcus Bright and a younger man named Corey, who had recently joined Derek's team, arrived together already in the middle of a story that required several hand gestures to complete. Claudette settled into the armchair nearest the window with her wine and the specific composure of a woman who had arrived as an audience member and intended to remain one. By 8:15, the room was warm. With voices, the catering spread was half depleted, and Derek was at the center of it all, recounting the moment Raymond Cross had called him with the official confirmation, his voice rising and falling with the natural drama of a man who had rehearsed this story in his head several times already and was now delivering it to its ideal audience. 2 years, he said, holding his champagne glass loosely by the stem. 2 years working toward this, and I'll tell you, it doesn't come without sacrifice, without putting in the time. Nobody hands you anything. Marcus nodded vigorously. Corey said, "That's right." Harold Washington laughed, though there had been nothing particularly funny said. Roberta, from the end of the table, straightened slightly in her chair and said, "And without the right foundation at home, don't forget that." There was a small, warm murmur of agreement around the table. Derek raised his glass in Meghan's direction, a brief public gesture, efficient, the kind of acknowledgement that fulfills a social obligation without requiring actual attention. "To Meghan," he said, "for holding things down." "To Meghan," the table echoed. She lifted her glass and smiled. It was a good smile, composed, warm, entirely unreadable, to anyone who had not spent years learning to look beneath the surface of things. She drank. At 9 o'clock, while Derek was in conversation with Marcus near the fireplace, Roberta found her way to the kitchen. Meghan was refilling the water pitcher at the sink. She heard Roberta's footsteps, the particular rhythm of a woman who moved with the confidence of someone who believed every room she entered was hers by right and did not turn around. "He did it," Roberta said, leaning against the counter with the satisfaction of a woman reviewing a completed project. "Everything I always said he was capable of." "He did," Meghan agreed. "You know I wasn't always sure about." Roberta paused, selecting her words with the care of someone who wanted to wound precisely rather than broadly. "The arrangement. The way things were set up between you two. I worried it wasn't balanced. A man like Derek needs a partner who matches him. Professionally, socially." Meghan turned off the tap. Balance is interesting, she said. She dried her hands, turned to face Roberta with the calm, complete attention she had been giving her for 5 years. You know what I found in my work? The most unbalanced arrangements are usually the ones where one party has significantly more information than the other. Roberta looked at her. Something shifted in her expression, not understanding, not yet, but a faint, involuntary awareness that the sentence had a shape she hadn't entirely followed. Well, she said after a moment. Yes, I suppose. Enjoy the party, Roberta, Meghan said. She picked up the water pitcher and walked back to the table. At 10:47, after the guests had gone and Derek was stacking plates in the kitchen with the distracted efficiency of a man still riding the energy of his own celebration, Meghan's phone lit up on the dining table. A message from an unknown number forwarded through Patricia's office as they had arranged. She picked it up, read it once, set it face down. The message was 4 lines. It was from Raymond Cross, sent to her professional email and forwarded as agreed. It read, Monsieur Cole, confirming your participation in Thursday's all-hands presentation. You will be introduced as a standing member of the approval committee at approximately 10 a.m. Please arrive by 9:30. Looking forward to finally meeting you in person. Finally meeting you in person. Raymond Cross, who had worked at Vantage Group for 11 years, who had processed Derek's promotion package, who had sent congratulations emails to Derek Diaz and approval confirmations to M. Cole, and had never once not, in 11 years, connected the two names to the same household, the same kitchen, the same dining table, where Derek was currently stacking plates and humming something tuneless and satisfied under his breath. Meghan looked at her husband's back. He was still humming. She thought about Raymond's words, finally meeting you in person, and felt moving through her with the quiet, inexorable momentum of something that had been a very long time in the building, the specific sensation of a door she had been holding, carefully, deliberately closed, beginning at last to open. She placed the phone in her bag. I'm going to bed, she said. Derek looked over his shoulder. Already it's not even 11. Early morning, she said. He nodded, turned back to the plates. I'll be up in a bit. She climbed the stairs. In the bedroom, she laid out her clothes for Thursday with the care she reserved for days that required her to be completely immovably herself. The white blazer, the dark tailored trousers, the small gold earrings her grandmother had left her. Then she got into bed, turned off the light, and slept deeply, completely, without interruption, for the first time in 8 months. Thursday morning arrived with the particular clarity that follows a night of genuine, uninterrupted sleep. Meghan was up at 5:50, not because the alarm told her to be, but because her body understood, with the precise animal instinct of a creature that has spent months in careful preparation, that today was not a day for lingering. She moved through the morning routine with the focused economy of someone who has thought through every detail in advance and has nothing left to second guess. Shower, coffee, the white blazer, the dark trousers, the gold earrings placed in one unhurried motion. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for exactly as long as it took to confirm that everything was in order. Then she went downstairs and made breakfast for one. Derek was still asleep. She could hear it in the quality of the silence from upstairs, the specific weighted stillness of a man in the deep middle of sleep, entirely unaware that the morning had already begun making decisions without him. She did not wake him. She sat at the kitchen island with her coffee and her toast, and the pale early light coming through the window at the angle she had always loved best, and she ate quietly and she thought about nothing in particular, and it was the most peaceful 20 minutes she had spent in this kitchen, in longer than she could precisely calculate. At 6:45, she picked up her bag, her laptop case, and her keys. She paused at the bottom of the stairs. Upstairs, Derek slept on. She did not leave a note. She arrived at Patricia's office at 7:15. Patricia was already there, had been there, Meghan suspected since before 6, because the yellow legal pad on the desk was already half filled with notes, and the coffee in the French press was at the precise temperature that indicated it had been made approximately 40 minutes ago. Patricia looked up when Meghan walked in, and performed a brief, comprehensive visual assessment of the kind that contained in about 2 seconds everything a longer conversation might have taken 20 minutes to establish. You slept, Patricia said. First time in months, Meghan said. Good. Patricia turned the legal pad toward her. Here is where we are. The update was delivered in the efficient, sequential manner that Meghan had always appreciated. No editorializing, no dramatic framing, just the facts arranged in the order of their relevance. The lender's fraud division had received the complaint Tuesday morning. Their initial document review had been completed by Wednesday afternoon. The forensic signature comparison, which Patricia had expedited through a contact at a firm that specialized in financial fraud cases, had been formalized Wednesday evening. The conclusion was unambiguous. The signature on the loan guarantee was not consistent with Meghan's verified signature samples. It was consistent, however, with Derek's own handwriting patterns and several key letter formations, suggesting he had attempted to replicate her signature, rather than trace it, a decision that had, from a forensic standpoint, made the case considerably simpler to establish. The lender had notified Vantage Group's legal office Wednesday at 5 p.m. Vantage Group's legal office had notified HR Wednesday at 6:47 p.m. HR had placed a hold on Derek's director confirmation, not a revocation, not yet, but a formal administrative pause, pending the outcome of the fraud review at 7:23 p.m. Derek had not been notified. He doesn't know yet, Meghan said. It was not a question. As of 7 a.m. this morning, no, Patricia said. The HR notification protocol requires a direct conversation with the employee, which Raymond Cross was scheduled to conduct at 8:30. Meghan looked at the clock on Patricia's wall. 7:19. In 71 minutes, Derek Diaz would receive a phone call that would reframe in a single conversation everything he believed about the morning he had woken up to. And the all-hands presentation, Meghan asked. Proceeds as scheduled, Patricia said. 10 a.m. Raymond confirmed last night that your introduction as a committee member goes forward regardless of the HR situation. The two matters are being handled on separate tracks, at least for now. The legal office wanted the presentation to proceed normally to avoid signaling anything before the formal process is initiated. So I walk in at 10, Meghan said. You walk in at 10? Patricia confirmed. As Monsieur Cole, standing member of the approval committee, exactly as you have been for 3 years. Meghan nodded. She reached for the coffee Patricia had poured without being asked and held the cup in both hands. Outside the window, Atlanta was assembling itself into a Thursday traffic thickening on the boulevard, the coffee shop across the street. Opening its doors, a woman in running clothes moving along the sidewalk with the bright, purposeful energy of someone who had already done the hardest thing she was going to do today. Patricia, Meghan said. Yes. After today, how long for the divorce filing to be formally initiated? I can have the papers ready to file by end of business today, Patricia said. Given the prenuptial agreement, the asset separation is clean. Cole and Associates is entirely protected. The marital property, the house, the joint accounts will require standard division proceedings, but the prenup significantly simplifies the timeline. File today? Meghan said. This afternoon. Patricia made a note. At 8:43, Meghan's phone rang. She was sitting in her car in the Vantage Group parking structure 45 minutes early, reviewing her notes for the committee introduction. She looked at the screen. Derek. She let it ring 3 times. Then she answered. Meghan. His voice was different from any version of it she had heard in months, stripped of the easy confidence, the performative warmth, the particular tone he used when he was managing a room. What was left underneath was something rawer and smaller, something that sounded for the first time in a very long time entirely unrehearsed. I just got off the phone with Raymond Cross. She said nothing. She let the silence hold. He said there's a hold on the director confirmation, something about a fraud review, a loan. A pause. She could hear him breathing rapid, shallow, the breath of a man whose body has understood something his mind is still refusing to fully process. Meghan, I need you to tell me you didn't. I need to know if you, Derek, she said. What? You'll have your answers Thursday. The line was quiet for 4 full seconds. What does that mean? His voice had changed again, lower now, with an edge that was trying to be authoritative and landing somewhere considerably closer to afraid. Meghan, what are you doing? She looked through the windshield at the concrete columns of the parking structure, at the strip of gray Atlanta sky visible between levels, at the small, ordinary details of a Thursday morning proceeding entirely without drama in every direction. I'm going to work, she said. She ended the call, placed the phone in her bag, opened her laptop, and spent the remaining 37 minutes before 9:30 reviewing her committee notes with the focused, unhurried attention of a woman who had prepared completely, who had nothing left to doubt, and who was simply at long last ready to walk through the door. The Vantage Group all-hands presentation was held in the main conference hall on the 14th floor. It was a large room, capacity for 120, arranged in tiered rows of seating that curved gently toward a raised presentation platform at the front, flanked by 2 floor-to-ceiling screens and a podium bearing the company's logo in brushed silver. The room had been designed, Meghan had always thought, to make the people on the platform look important and the people in the seats look like an audience, which was, she supposed, precisely the point. She arrived at 9:27. Raymond Cross met her at the elevator, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s, wire-frame glasses, the careful handshake of someone who understood that first impressions between professionals carried weight. He looked at her with the particular expression of a person whose mental image of someone built entirely from email correspondence over 3 years is being rapidly revised by the reality standing in front of them. "Ms. Cole," he said, "it's genuinely good to finally meet you." "And you, Raymond," she said. He walked her to the green room behind the platform, a small, well-lit space with a coffee station and 4 chairs where the other committee members were already assembled. She greeted each of them by name. They had corresponded for years. The handshakes carried the easy familiarity of colleagues who have worked well together without ever sharing a physical room. No one in that green room knew her as anyone other than Meghan Cole. The hall filled between 9:40 and 9:55. Meghan stood to the side of the green room door, visible through a narrow gap, and watched the rows fill with the faces of Vantage Group's full-staff analysts, associates, managers, assistants, the assembled ecosystem of a mid-sized strategy firm on a Thursday morning, settling into their seats with coffee cups and phones and the mild collective anticipation of a company meeting that had been described in the calendar invite as important. She saw Derek arrive at 9:48. He came in from the left entrance, moving quickly, his charcoal chalk-striped suit, the one he saved for moments that count, slightly less composed than it had been at 6:55 that morning. His tie was straight, but his jaw was tight in the way that only someone who knew his face very well would notice. He found a seat in the 4th row. He sat down. He checked his phone twice in 30 seconds. He did not look toward the platform. Roberta arrived 2 minutes later. She had been invited. Derek had texted her Tuesday evening after the party, after the champagne, while Meghan was laying out her white blazer upstairs. "Come Thursday. They're doing a formal acknowledgement at the all-hands. I want you there." Roberta had arrived in her champagne-colored dress, the one she wore to occasions she considered worth documenting. She settled into a seat 2 rows behind. Derek smoothed her dress, looked around the room with the composed satisfaction of a woman who believed she was present for a coronation. She did not notice from 2 rows back the particular set of her son's shoulders. Raymond Cross opened the presentation at 10 o'clock precisely. He welcomed the staff, outlined the agenda, quarterly results, strategic priorities for the next fiscal period, and a formal acknowledgement of the company's governance structure, including the Standing Approval Committee, whose work he noted was foundational to Vantage Group's promotion and leadership pipeline. "The committee operates with independence and discretion," Raymond said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Its members are contracted externally to ensure objectivity in their identities, while not confidential, are not broadly publicized within the company. Today, as part of our commitment to transparency and leadership processes, we're formally introducing the current committee to the full staff." He looked down at his notes. "Our committee consists of 5 members. I'll introduce them each as they join me on the platform." 4 names were called. 4 people walked from the green room to the platform in measured professional sequence, each acknowledged with the polite, attentive applause of a staff that was still Meghan, sensed mostly waiting to understand why this mattered. "And our 5th member," Raymond said, "who has served on the committee for 3 years and whose review and signature were instrumental in several of our most significant leadership appointments during that period." He looked at his notes one final time. "And Monsieur Cole? Meghan Cole." Meghan walked through the door. She moved onto the platform with the even, unhurried pace of a woman who had walked into important rooms before and understood that composure was not performed. It was simply what remained when everything unnecessary had been removed. She took her place beside the other committee members. She looked out at the room. 114 people. Tiered rows, coffee cups and phones, and the particular quality of collective attention that a room produces when it has suddenly understood that something is happening that it did not expect. In the 4th row, Derek Diaz had gone completely still. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, not in 5 years of marriage, not in the 3 years before that, when they had been building something together, not in any of the 1,000 ordinary moments and the handful of extraordinary ones that had accumulated between them over the course of a shared life. It was not anger, it was not guilt, though both of those things were present underneath it. It was something more foundational than either. It was the specific, dismantling shock of a man who has just understood in a single moment the complete scope of what he did not know. 2 rows behind him, Roberta Diaz sat with her hands folded in her lap, and her champagne-colored dress, and her expression of composed maternal satisfaction, and then something shifted in her face slowly, the way a room changes when a cloud moves across the sun, as her eyes moved from the platform to the back of her son's head, and then back to the platform again, assembling a picture she had not come prepared to see. Her mouth opened slightly. She did not close it. Raymond Cross waited for the introductory applause to settle. Then he moved to the next item on the agenda, a procedural note from the legal office delivered with the careful neutrality of a man who had been briefed and was performing his professional obligation. Before we move to quarterly results, Raymond said, "The legal office has asked me to note that an administrative review is currently underway regarding a financial matter involving a member of our senior staff. In accordance with company policy, the matter is being handled through appropriate channels and will not be discussed publicly. The relevant individual has been notified and the review is proceeding." A murmur moved through the room, quite uncertain, the sound of 100 people trying to calculate what they had just been told. In the fourth row, Derek did not move. A woman in the third row, one of the analysts, leaned slightly toward her colleague and whispered something. Her colleague glanced toward Derek and then quickly away. The room understood, even if it did not yet know the precise details, that the relevant individual was sitting in the fourth row in a chalk-striped suit that had been pressed for a different kind of mourning. Meghan stood on the platform. She did not look at Derek. She looked instead at a fixed point above the back row, the calm, neutral focus of a woman who is present and composed, and entirely finished with waiting. Raymond Cross asked if the committee members had any remarks. The first 4 declined. Raymond looked at Meghan. She stepped to the microphone. "Thank you, Raymond," she said. Her voice was level, clear, the voice of a woman who had spent 3 years in this building under one name and 5 years in a marriage under another, and who was for the first time standing in a room where both of those things were simultaneously and completely true. "I'm glad to be here." She stepped back. That was all. Behind her on the screen, the first slide of the quarterly results presentation loaded in clean blue and white. The meeting proceeded. The ordinary business of a Thursday morning at Vantage Group continued around the extraordinary thing that had just happened in the middle of it, the way rivers continue around stones, not ignoring them, but flowing past with the indifferent, inexorable patience of something that has always known which way it is going. In the fourth row, Derek Diaz sat with his hands on his knees and his eyes fixed on the platform in the specific, irreversible understanding that the woman he had called worthless in this company's building, in front of this company's people, had been for 3 years, for the entire duration of his ambition, for every promotion review and committee meeting, and quietly signed approval, the person holding the pen. His pen. He had not known. He had not thought to look. The thing about a collapse is that it rarely looks from the outside the way it feels from the inside. From the outside, Derek Diaz walked out of the Vantage Group all-hands presentation at 11:43 on a Thursday morning, looking like a man who had somewhere to be. Jacket buttoned, stride purposeful. The surface details of composure assembled with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood, even in the middle of everything falling apart, that being watched required a performance. From the inside, Meghan knew, with the precise, calibrated understanding of a woman who had spent 5 years learning to read the architecture beneath the surface of things, that he was walking the way people walk when the ground has shifted under them and they have not yet decided whether to acknowledge it. She watched him leave from the side of the platform where she was speaking with 2 of the committee members about a scheduling matter. She watched him move through the thinning crowd toward the exit with his phone already at his ear, and she noted cataloged filed did not react to the specific speed of his exit. Not too fast. Not slow enough to invite conversation. The calibrated pace of a man managing optics while his interior was in free fall. She turned back to her colleagues and finished the conversation. By noon, the administrative hold on Derek's director confirmation had been formally converted to a suspension pending investigation. Patricia called at 12:17 with the update delivered in the quiet, even tone she used for information that was significant but not surprising, the tone of someone reporting the arrival of a thing that had been carefully, deliberately set in motion and had now arrived exactly as intended. The lender's fraud division had completed its preliminary review. The forensic signature analysis, 3 pages, technically precise, unambiguous in its conclusions, had been formally submitted to Vantage Group's legal office alongside the original loan documents. HR had convened an emergency session at 11 a.m. Derek had been called into a meeting at 11:30, the same 30-minute window during which Meghan noted with the quiet irony of someone who pays attention to timelines she had been standing on the platform, being introduced to his colleagues as the woman who had signed his career forward for 3 years. He had been escorted from the building at 12:05. Not publicly, not dramatically. A quiet conversation with HR and a member of the legal team, a walk to his office to collect personal items under supervision, a ride down in the elevator with a woman from security who had performed this particular function enough times to have developed a face for it, neutral, professional, entirely without judgment. His key card had been deactivated at 12:07. And the formal charges, Meghan asked. The lender is proceeding with the fraud filing, Patricia said. Given the forensic report and the loan value, we're looking at felony forgery charges at minimum. His attorney, assuming he retains one by end of day, will likely pursue a negotiated resolution. The process will take months. Months, Meghan said. Yes, Patricia said. And are you all right? I'm fine, Meghan said. And she was. Not fine in the brittle performative way of someone suppressing something larger. Fine in the way of a woman who has carried a weight for a very long time and has at last set it down and is now simply standing in the unfamiliar lightness of its absence, learning what it feels like to breathe without it. The divorce papers, Patricia said. I'm filing this afternoon, 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, Meghan confirmed. She ended the call and sat for a moment in the quiet of her car in the Vantage Group parking structure in the same spot where she had answered Derek's call 3 hours ago. Outside the windshield, the concrete columns stood in their gray in different rows. The strip of Atlanta sky between levels was the same pale blue it had been at 8:43. Everything looked the same. Everything was entirely different. Lexi Monroe submitted a request for indefinite personal leave at 1:15 that afternoon. Meghan learned this not from Patricia, not from any official channel, but from a brief, carefully worded text message sent by Corey, the younger man from Derek's team, who had attended the party Wednesday night, to a mutual contact who had, with the particular efficiency of professional networks in moments of crisis, ensured the information reached the people it was relevant to. Lexi's gone. Packed her desk before lunch, heard what happened, and just left. Meghan read the message once, then she deleted it. She had not expected drama from Lexi Monroe. She had expected exactly this, the clean, self-preserving exit of a woman whose investment in Derek Diaz had been predicated entirely on his usefulness, and who had understood with the rapid calculation of someone always tracking the value of her positions that a man escorted from a building at noon on a Thursday with a fraud investigation opening behind him was no longer useful in any of the ways that had mattered. The condo in Buckhead would remain in the lender's dispute process for the foreseeable future. Lexi Monroe had lost both the man and the property in the space of a single morning. Meghan felt nothing in particular about this. Not satisfaction, not sympathy. Simply the neutral acknowledgement of a sequence that had run to its natural conclusion. Roberta called at 2:45. Meghan was at her desk at Cole & Associates working through a client deliverable with the focused, purposeful calm of a woman returning to herself after a long absence. When she saw the name on the screen, she set down her pen, looked at the phone for one full ring cycle, and answered. Meghan. Roberta's voice was different. Stripped of the smooth, proprietary warmth it carried on ordinary calls, the warmth that had always contained within it, like a current beneath still water, the quiet assumption of superiority. What was left underneath was something smaller, something that sounded for the first time in 5 years of Thursday calls and Sunday dinners and champagne-colored dresses at occasion designed to make a point genuinely uncertain. I saw, Roberta said. At the presentation? I didn't know. Meghan said nothing. She waited. I want you to know that Roberta stopped. Started again. The things I said, at dinner, about contributing, about another stop. The particular silence of a woman who has prepared a sentence and discovered midway through it that none of the available endings are adequate. I didn't know who you were. Meghan looked out her office window at the Atlanta afternoon, the city moving in its ordinary Thursday rhythm, the oak tree in the courtyard below, shifting gently in a wind she could not feel from up here, but could see in the motion of the leaves. I know you didn't, Roberta, she said. Her voice carried no anger, no satisfaction, no edge of any kind. Simply the quiet, settled clarity of a woman who has nothing left to prove to this particular audience. That was rather the point. The line was quiet for a long moment. Roberta did not say anything further. Meghan waited another beat, then said, Take care of yourself. She ended the call, set the phone face down on her desk, picked up her pen, returned to the client deliverable with the steady, unhurried attention of a woman who had learned over a very long time that the work was always there, patient, reliable, entirely indifferent to the personal weather of the people doing it, and that returning to it was in its own quiet way one of the most grounding things a person could do. At 4 o'clock, Patricia filed the divorce papers. Meghan was still at her desk when the confirmation came through. A single email, 3 lines. The formal language of legal process case number, filing date, service timeline that contained within its procedural plainness the entire weight of a chapter closing. She read it once, saved it to the folder Patricia had labeled with characteristic precision Cole versus Diaz final. Then she closed her laptop, put on her jacket, and drove home through the Atlanta late afternoon The city golden and unhurried around her, the traffic moving at the easy, unforced pace of a Thursday, winding toward its end, the radio playing something she didn't recognize but liked the tempo of steady and forward-moving, and entirely unconcerned with what had come before. She drove with the windows down. The air was warm. She did not cry. She did not need to. 4 months is not a long time. In the architecture of a life, in the accumulated weight of years and choices and the slow, patient work of becoming someone, 4 months is barely a season. It is the time it takes for a garden to move from one version of itself to another, for a city to shift from one kind of light to a different one, for a woman who has spent years carrying something heavy to learn incrementally what it feels like to move without it. Meghan had spent the first 2 weeks simply sleeping, not the careful, managed sleep of someone holding themselves together across a long period of sustained precision, the sleep she had known for 8 months, the kind that was always slightly insufficient, always interrupted by the low hum of awareness that something unresolved was waiting on the other side of morning. This was different. This was the deep, complete, almost animal sleep of a body that had finally received permission to rest. She slept 8 hours, sometimes 9. She woke without an alarm. She made coffee, slowly stood at her kitchen window, her kitchen now, in the house that the divorce settlement had cleanly, unceremoniously assigned to her along with everything else the prenuptial agreement had protected, and watched the light move across the backyard oak tree with the unhurried attention of a woman who had nowhere urgent to be, and was for the first time in longer than she could precisely remember entirely at peace with that. The hydrangeas along the front walk had bloomed a second time. She hadn't expected that. She had planted them for the spring bloom, and they had given her that, and she had considered the matter closed. But apparently the Atlanta summer had other ideas, and she came home one evening to find them full and heavy-headed again in the early October warmth, improbably generous, as though the garden understood something about second chances that she was still in the process of learning. She left them where they were. Cole and Associates had not paused for any of it. This was one of the things Meghan valued most about the work she had built, its fundamental indifference to personal weather. The clients did not know what had happened in her marriage. The quarterly reports did not care. The strategy decks and the market analyses and the committee correspondence, and the careful, precise work of advising organizations through complex decisions, all of it had continued at its own pace, requiring of her only what it had always required: her attention, her judgment, her ability to see clearly. She had given it all 3. The firm had closed 2 new client engagements in September. A third was in final negotiation. Patricia, who sat on the advisory board, had noted at their October meeting that the firm's revenue trajectory for the fiscal year was the strongest it had been since incorporation. She had delivered this information with the same measured precision she brought to everything, and Meghan had received it the same way, not with the performed modesty of someone downplaying an achievement, and not with the loud compensatory pride of someone who needed the numbers to mean something beyond what they simply factually were. They were good numbers. She had earned them. That was sufficient. On a Tuesday morning in late October, Meghan arrived at Cole & Associates at 8:15 and found Patricia already in the conference room with coffee for 2 and the advisory board agenda open on the table. They worked through the agenda in an hour and 40 minutes. Revenue review, pipeline discussion, a decision about expanding the associate team, 2 new hires positions Patricia had drafted job descriptions for with the thoroughness she applied to everything. Meghan approved both descriptions with minor amendments. They discussed a new engagement in the financial services sector that would require a dedicated project lead. They identified 2 internal candidates. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning meeting. It was, Meghan thought as she closed her notebook and reached for the last of her coffee, exactly the kind of morning she had been building toward for years. Not extraordinary, not cinematic, not the kind of morning that would be described to anyone with particular drama. Simply the morning of a woman running something she had built, making decisions that mattered in a room she owned with a colleague she trusted, in a life that was finally, completely, without qualification, entirely her own. "There's one more thing," Patricia said. She reached into the folder beside her and produced a single document, slid it across the table. Meghan looked at it. It was the final asset transfer confirmation from the divorce settlement. The last administrative thread of the legal process that had been running quietly and efficiently through the courts for 4 months. Everything properly assigned, properly filed, properly closed. At the bottom, a signature line. Her name, Meghan Cole, as it appeared on every professional document she had ever signed, printed in the clean, neutral font of legal paperwork. She picked up the pen Patricia offered. She signed. The motion was the same as it had always been, steady, even unhurried. The signature of a woman who had been signing her name to things that mattered for her entire professional life, and who had learned somewhere along the way that the pen was not a dramatic instrument. It was simply a tool. It did the work you asked of it, and then you set it down and the work was done. She set it down. "That's everything," Patricia said. "That's everything," Meghan agreed. She stayed at the office until 6. When she left, the Atlanta evening was doing the thing it did in late October. The light coming in low and amber, the air carrying the first real suggestion of coolness after the long summer, the city settling into the quieter rhythm of a weekday evening in a way that felt after the heat and the pace of the months before like an exhale. She drove home the long way, not because she needed to, not because she was avoiding anything or processing anything or working through the residue of something difficult, simply because the long way took her past the park on Cascade, where she had walked on Sunday mornings when she first moved to Atlanta before the marriage, when the city had been entirely new to her, and she had spent those early Sunday mornings learning its shapes and rhythms with the patient, curious attention she brought to everything she wanted to understand. She hadn't driven that way in years. It looked the same. The oak trees along the park boundary enormous and unhurried. The walking path that curved out of sight around a bend. A man throwing a ball for a dog who was spectacularly uninterested in returning it. 2 teenagers on a bench, heads together over a phone, laughing at something with the easy, unself-conscious joy of people who have not yet learned to be careful with their happiness. She slowed without stopping, looked, drove on. At home, she made dinner for one, the sweet potato dish her grandmother had taught her, the one she had made for Roberta's table, and eaten alone at the far end, the one that had tasted even then like something worth keeping. She made it properly this time, without the occasion, without the performance of it. She made it because she wanted it. She ate it at the kitchen island with a glass of wine and the quiet company of an evening that asked nothing of her. Afterward, she washed the dish, dried it, set it back in the cabinet. She went to the small office off the hallway, the room she had reclaimed in the weeks after the settlement cleared, of the things that had accumulated there during the marriage, and returned to what it had been before, a desk, a good lamp, a shelf of books she had chosen for herself, the framed photograph of her grandmother that had lived in storage for 2 years, because Derek had thought the frame looked old. It did look old. That was why she loved it. On the desk in the small ceramic dish she used for odds and ends there was a nameplate. Small, rectangular, the kind issued to employees and placed on desks at offices everywhere, entirely unremarkable in every respect except that it bore the name Meghan Diaz in the clean sans serif font of a life she had briefly genuinely tried to inhabit. She picked it up, held it for a moment, not with bitterness, not with the hot clarifying anger of someone cataloging a grievance, with something quieter than either of those things. The composed, complete attention of a woman looking clearly at something she is ready to put away. She opened the desk drawer. She placed the nameplate inside, face down without ceremony. She closed the drawer. Outside the window, the October evening had deepened into a blue dark that was neither day nor night, but the specific, generous hour between them, the hour that belongs to no particular obligation, that asks nothing, that simply is. Meghan sat at her desk. She turned on the lamp. She opened her notebook to a clean page. And she thought not with triumph, not with the performative resolution of someone arriving at a lesson, but with the quiet, settled certainty of a woman who has come through patience and precision, and the long discipline of knowing her own worth without requiring anyone else to confirm it to the far side of something difficult, and found waiting for her there simply herself. Strength isn't loud. It never announces itself. It doesn't need the room to go quiet, or the heads to turn, or the name to be read from a podium before it knows what it is. It is patient. It is steady. It is the signature on a document that changes everything written in a hand that never once trembled. It was and had always been entirely hers. There will be people in your life who look at everything you are and see only what is convenient for them to see, who will take the quiet in you for emptiness, the patience in you for weakness, the name you carry privately for proof that you have nothing worth knowing. Let them. Because the woman who does not need to explain herself to every room she walks into is not diminished by the rooms that misrate her. She is simply waiting with the clear-eyed, unhurried confidence of someone who has already done the work for the moment when the truth makes its own introduction. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You do not have to announce yourself to matter. You only have to know completely, without apology, in the quiet of your own knowing exactly who you are. The rest will follow. It always does.